Michael, let's talk about this court proceedings and what happened here with the trial. It lasted less than 3 days, really. So what do you think? Do you think they got a fair trial in this case?
Yes, Susan, I can't, it's premature to tell whether there's a fair trial until we see the basis for the judgment, as some of the Australian ministers have mentioned during the course of the previous month. But I come to the situation as a member of civil society. I'm, as you know, Transparency International is a non-profit, an NGO. I've never been an official or a judge or come at it that way, but there's no doubt that the trial is being watched very, very eagerly in Australia as to the outcome. There's no doubt, as you were aware, that the Australian cities are full of businessmen doing business in China, wanting to put their executives into China. And of course, in many cities, there are ethnic Chinese who want to join these companies.
Yeah, Michael, I understand that you don't have a legal background, but let me just ask you, as a watcher, as someone who works at Transparency International, looking for fairness in corporations around the world, when you hear of a 3-day trial, does that seem a little bizarre to you in terms of how fair it actually was for everyone to bring their cases to the front?
Susan, as an Australian, it's very difficult to compare the situation in China. China does things very, very differently, as you know, from what we have in Australia, and it would be useful just to run through some of there's a wide gulf between the procedures we have in criminal trials and those in China, so it's very, very difficult for us as Australians to comprehend just how it's going to play out, or in fact how the procedures work there.
Okay, well, let me just ask you about those closed-door sessions, because some of this trial was held behind closed doors. Even Australian diplomats couldn't get in just to listen in on the trial itself. Do you think that should have been changed for Australia if it was we have an Australian national on trial, of course?
Yes, an Australian national indeed, and you may know that there's a bilateral treaty between Australia and China in which they have carefully spelled out the ability of consuls from either side to be there present at trials of their nationals. I've looked at that a little, and in fact it's been subject of commentary in different places. And the wording looks to be as clear as you can get in this type of document. Article 11 of that bilateral treaty is it's in a very small way qualified in the version that we've seen, but it couldn't have been clearer the way in which it spells out the right of the consul to be present at these trials.
If that's the case, Michael, why didn't the Australian government make a bigger push then to get into these closed-door trials, if that's the case?
I'm not in the mind of the Australian government, Susan. There's obviously a delicate situation here, very delicate, and how they are going to respond later on is something we've got to think about. But in terms of treaty signing and treaty adherence, there's a question there. The criminal procedure, after all, in China is laid down in the law, and of course it is very pleasing in China to see the extent to which the respect for legal institutions is growing apace, and this is a tricky one to deal with in that context.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What about these charges of bribery? You know, we have these 4 individuals, already some of them pleading guilty to accepting $13 million in bribes among them. But what about the person who actually paid some of these bribes? We have a steel billionaire in China who was implicated here, but he hasn't even been brought to court for any testimony or even brought up on charges themselves.
Yeah, that's one of the differences that we're noticing. Of course, the right to have people who are testifying in your favour or against you as witnesses seems to be very limited. But the point that I'd like to make is that the two or the twin charges that are being levelled against these individuals, these executives, are really quite separate. It seems to me the charge of receiving bribes does not seem to be related to that of taking commercial secrets, and it's not at all clear why the two have been mixed together in commentary or at all. They're very separate.
Okay.
And
Michael? Yep, we got to go, unfortunately, but thank you for your insights today. Michael Ahrens of Transparency International.